Today's discovery in the case against Caylee could change the way both prosecutors and defense attorneys present their case. Tony Pipitone is back with us now. And Tony, last week the state took the death penalty off the table. Is it possible that they're able to bring it back now?
Oh, yeah, they are, Jackie. The state attorney's office tells me it can change the charges and the penalties that it seeks any time before a jury is picked or Casey Anthony enters a plea. And our legal experts say today's discovery of a body that is likely Caylee's changes just about everything.
Assuming this van contains the remains of Caylee Anthony, defense attorney Caylee Mason and former prosecutor Elizabeth Rotter agree things do not look good for her accused murderer.
And what does it do for the state's case now that there's a body?
It hugely bolsters the case. I mean, a jury is always a little reluctant to convict because they're afraid about, you don't want to convict an innocent person. Absolutely, you would not want to do that. So now there's going to be no doubt that she's dead.
And Mason says claims that Caylee was really alive all this time, made by Casey, her attorney, and her family, will now work against them when this goes to trial.
Then all that talking and all the press interviews and the parents going on this show and that show and the lawyer going to different shows establishes they have no credibility whatsoever.
Still, a lot depends on what tests reveal about those remains.
The most important thing is, how did she die? It could have been an accidental death, as we've talked before, and an improper disposal. It could have been an outright brutal homicide. We don't know, and until the medical examiner is finished and renders a report, no one's going to know.
But the former prosecutor says an accidental death defense would certainly be hard to swallow.
What would a reasonable person do in the case of an accident? You call 911, or you call your parents, or you call a close friend. Do you go borrow a shovel from a neighbor? Probably not.
And, as disturbed as Casey may be, an insanity defense would be even harder.
It's really difficult to not be criminally responsible. You only have to really prove two things: that they know right from wrong, and they understand the consequences for their actions. And obviously, Casey understood the consequences for her actions because she worked really hard to cover it up.
So our experts wind up agreeing that if it all plays out as many expect,
you can pretty well predict that there's going to be a life sentence, and either on plea and get it over with, or have a circus trial and then be convicted and then get life.
And Elizabeth, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
But you see life in prison in her future?
Yeah.
Of course, as we said, we asked our experts to assume the body was Caylee's, and there's always a chance both sides could reach some sort of plea agreement that could involve something less than a life sentence. But our former prosecutor said if Casey Anthony really did this as it is alleged, is that dangerous a criminal, perhaps it's best for everyone that she spend the rest of her life.
Who would be better on Casey's jury? Depends who you ask. And so Tony Pipitone did. Good evening, I'm Jacqueline London.
And I'm Mike Garofalo. The case against Casey is taking shape as we speak.
The mother charged with murder sat in court today and heard about her father's painful suicide note and watched as the crime scene investigator who inspected her car talked about what he found. It's all leading up to what may be the most crucial part of a criminal trial, choosing a jury. And tonight, Tony Pipitone looks at some of what will go into finding those 12 people.
from a pool of hundreds of names chosen randomly from driver's license records, 12 people will wind up here, sitting across from a young woman they've heard of, but have sworn have not assumed is guilty.
So obviously, everybody's going to have heard about this. And there may be some people that haven't. And frankly, as a prosecution, I'd be scared to death of those people.
We asked both that former prosecutor and defense attorney Caylee Mason what kind of person would make a good juror for the defense.
I would want jurors that understand enough about life to understand their frailties and weaknesses in life, have some empathy, some forgiveness, and that would not be young people.
And for the prosecution,
I want people that are able to focus and kind of see through those smoke screens and listen to what evidence is being presented and weigh it and see what's reasonable and what's unreasonable.
It's part legal art, but also part science, says jury consultant Susan Constantine.
A child disappears and the mother doesn't call the police for 30 days and makes up the name of a babysitter that she left her with and changes the story about where the baby was taken from her. Who's more apt to believe that kind of story or versus those who just would say this is ridiculous and this woman's lying?
The person that would say that they're not guilty would be someone that's not as logical. They could say, well, I can visualize that happening, so therefore that would make sense to me, versus a logical person would say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to me.
But in a case where there are no fingerprints or confession, no DNA or eyewitnesses, extremely logical people might be a problem, especially if they watch a lot of this.
Whoever killed this poor kid knew what they were doing.
It's called the CSI effect, a tendency to acquit when the scientific evidence is anything less than ironclad, like it is on the TV show.
So you don't want a CSI viewer?
No. I ask the panel and I say, who watches it? Do you understand that that's not real?
Mason, though, might look differently on fans of the show.
There's an awful lot of CSI stuff that is true or partially true. And there's a lot of forensic evidence that doesn't hit most courtrooms because the lawyers don't know about it. They have so many things, it appears, that have been explored forensically that have been negative that, you know, tends to be beneficial for the defense.
When potential jurors are asked about the case, Constantine would be looking at, as much as listening to, their answers.
I am one that reads facial gestures. I'm one that reads body language. I can tell whether they're deceitful or whether they're telling a lie or whether they're stretching the story or they're fabricating or they're anxious or they're nervous or whatever. Their verbal and their nonverbal communication needs to be consistent.
So not every smile is a smile.
It's not always genuine.
Constantine says more than 2,500 factors can be evaluated in determining whether someone is going to be for the defense or for the prosecution. So one can't choose on demographics alone. But we threw out some possibilities.
29-year-old divorced mother of two on her own. Good for the defense, good for the prosecution.
Well, that one would be more for the prosecution.
Why?
Well, they tend to be more angry, to be honest with you. We have found that those that have been divorced, that have children, they tend to be a little bit more angry, and especially if they're single parents.
And if Casey Anthony is sitting in front of them accused of murdering a child, where's that anger going to go?
Towards her, absolutely.
Mason would likely steer clear of a young mother as well.
I would not want this girl on my jury, but I'd be afraid she'd be trying to prove everybody how much better mother she is.
19-year-old single mother, high school dropout. Good for the defense, good for the prosecution?
Defense.
Why?
Well, because first of all, they don't have the education, the higher level of education. They tend to be what we call more egalitarian, and the statistics have proven that those type of individuals would generally prove, or have proven, that they would vote more for the defense.
How about you, Elizabeth?
Probably not, because I want someone that understands there's some level of responsibility that goes with having a child.
How about a 35-year-old married white male professional, say an accountant, someone, an engineer, someone who's detail-oriented?
If there is any evidence that is subject to any form of scientific precision and it helps the defense, then I might want one of those. If it helps the prosecution, I want them to watch it on TV.
Of course, we're still at least 7 months from trial. We don't even know yet what all the evidence will be, or even if the jury will be from Orange County. But if you're wondering what your odds are of being one of the chosen 12 in Orange County, Jacqueline, is probably less than 1 in 60,000.
And that jury consultant mentioned using statistics in choosing a juror. Is it really that scientific?
Well, Susan Constantine gave me some studies, and they do show that how people answer certain questions can be a predictor of how they are likely to lean in a case. Caylee Mason, though, says he relies a lot on his instincts, his knowledge, and his experience.
Either way, 12 people's lives will change dramatically for at least a month.
Sure thing.
All right.